If you buy from your dealer down the street or from a trap shop, you're going to get cheaper product. And it's pretty good product. We got to give people a reason. And when they see Jetty and they see that OCal symbol, you know that you're getting the absolute cleanest cannabis product that is available.
What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of The Dime. I'm Brian Fields, and with me, as always, is Kellen Finney. And this week, we got a very special guest, Ron Gershoni, co-founder of Jetty Extracts. Ron, thanks for taking the time. How are you doing today?
I'm great, guys. Thanks for having me on.
Excited to dive in. Kellen, how are you doing?
I'm doing really well. Really excited to talk to Ron. Really excited to dive into an OG West Coast brand. How are you doing, Brian?
Yeah, I'm stoked. There's a lot of lessons we're going to pull out of Ron today. A lot of things that he's seen during, got to be 10 years now, Ron, of like endurance in the sport, which we were talking about, and try to get an honest and an optimistic approach on like where we are and where we're going. But before we dive into some of the fun stuff, we're going to have to put you on the record, because with your business being split East Coast, West Coast, we should probably separate that out and go truly from where you started and where you were born as a way of separating at East Coast, West Coast. So if you had to be on the record where you were born, where would that be, Ron?
I was born in Englewood, New Jersey.
Let the record reflect, Kelly.
That's a tough one. I got nothing for that.
That was fair. So Ron, for our listeners unfamiliar, can you give a quick background and kind of how you found your way to the cannabis space?
I grew up in New Jersey, ended up going to University of Michigan. I studied business there, and then I moved back to New York City, and I lived there for almost a decade. And I was working in commercial real estate, and then I moved into the natural products space. I was running an aluminum-free deodorant brand, so I kind of got a lot of exposure to sales and distribution of CPG and the retail environment. I got married in 2009, moved to California, was looking for a change of pace, kind of became enamored with the dispensary scene, been a cannabis consumer since I was fairly young. And in 2013, my father came out to visit me, and he decided to try using cannabis to help him with his back pain, and found that it helped him tremendously, especially sleeping at night. And that was the first exposure I had to the medicinal side. And I had some friends that were in the business, and I kind of asked them, what's going on? And they started showing me some concentrates, which I hadn't seen. And we ended up sort of, without much of a plan, deciding to buy some extraction equipment and make some products. We didn't have a brand or much of a strategy. It was more like a little side hustle, fun experiment. And, pretty quickly, I recognized that the dispensaries looked a lot like health food stores had looked in the 1980s. And my father was in that business, so I had been in and out of stores quite a bit as a child. And, back then there was very little in the way of branding. It was a lot of, scooping your own seeds and nuts. And fast forward to where Whole Foods was kind of the biggest player, and everything was taken over by brands. And it just felt like if we could create a brand with a really good product, that the dispensary environment would end up looking a lot more like Whole Foods than the 1980s health food stores. And so we ended up creating Jetty. We were in San Diego, all of us at the time. There's a surf jetty down in Ocean Beach that we named it after, so that someday in the future there would be a tie back to San Diego when we have these types of conversations. But yeah, we were just kind of experimenting, tinkering. There was no blueprint at the time. Concentrates, extraction was all very new in the market, and we just started making products and selling them.
I want to stay with that first extraction run. You buy the equipment, get it set up, and then is there like, hey, we're going to hop on YouTube, we're going to ask our buddy, what is that first experience like? And then how long did it take you to feel like you're making progress?
So I have a few co-founders. There were 4 of us when we started the business. Nate Ferguson, who's still very close with me and still is our leads all of product and tech. He's just brilliant when it comes to the cannabis plant and to the science around it. And he really embraced the extraction side of things. he had been hustling weed since he was a teenager and owned some dispensaries and some grows. So he was much more steeped in the industry at the time than I was. And so he was sourcing at the time trim. We bought a CO2 extraction equipment. And as I said, there was barely an instruction manual, but almost no one was doing it. And it was just a lot of trial and error, just, trying different pressures, different settings, different lengths of time, and seeing what comes out the other end, trying out different hardware on the vaporizer side. And, the amount of hours that he put in is, I think he probably has almost more hours than anyone in the world on these whole types of CO2 equipment for extraction. But yeah, a lot of YouTube, a lot of watching interviews and looking to see what's in the background in someone's lab. Like, what is that piece of equipment? Random calls to scientists, just trying to ask questions, go on different message boards. But at the end of the day, there was no really guide for us. It was very much just, we're going to keep trying stuff and keep working to make the product better. And back then, when we started, everyone was kind of cutting with MCT oil or some sort of PG. And that was one of our first real big goals, was like, how do we get just cannabis oil in a cartridge? We achieved that pretty quickly within the first few months. So we started the company in 2013. This is now our 11th year of operation.
Why cartridges at first?
They just were so amazing as far as
That's a good answer.
as like I had never seen them before. They were brand new, they were so convenient, so easy to use, but they actually kind of sucked. Like they didn't really taste that good, they didn't really perform that well, but it was just sort of the realization, if we could make something that has solid performance and tastes really good and is just weed in a cartridge and make it look like something on a shelf that we would want to buy, that was sort of, just seemed like it would be a great opportunity.
And then the process of creating that product to moving to the dispensaries and then kind of scaling it up. How long does that take? Just for people to understand like the type of effort that goes into getting started on a project like yours.
Yeah, it was a really different time. This was the 215 days and there was really no regulation. So we were operating out of unlicensed facilities and there was just no requirements around packaging or process or anything. So today it's a completely different thing. To get started up today would cost more money and take more time than it did then. We were self-funded. I had invested in some real estate that I sold, and then along with my father, we invested some money to buy equipment and get the business running. And for several years, that was the entire funding was just all ourselves. It was fast back then. We bought the equipment, we set it up, we started extracting, we filled some cartridges, and we walked them into, we made a package, we walked into stores and we were in business and we were selling. And what was crazy was it was super popular right away. There just wasn't much competition. And we were so small and had such low throughput that we couldn't even make much, but we were just selling in San Diego. But it happened quickly. And I remember I was watching an episode of Shark Tank at one point where someone threw out a number of revenue they were doing. And the sharks all sort of looked impressed. And I don't know, it was a couple $100,000 over the year. And I was like, oh, we're actually hitting that already. And it was, within our first year, it happened very organically. And those days, it was very easy to get a product into the market. And if it was even mediocre, we'd always, so it was a very different environment than anything you would find today.
Then take us through kind of like the scaling of the business and fast forward now, because obviously, as we've seen, there's a ton of businesses that started back then. Maybe most of them aren't around now. So there's obviously decisions that you made along the way that left could have been disaster, right was the right route. So take us through some of those decisions and how you led to where we are now.
I believe we're one of the oldest brands across any category in the legal industry at this point. Most of our friends who tried going into the legal side back in those years have unfortunately not succeeded for many reasons. It's a really hard industry. There's a lot of luck involved. I think that we made so many mistakes. We made every mistake that you could possibly make. I think we were sort of fortunate that we didn't have outside money and we ran the business like it was our own, it was like our own money. It was our own thing. So we weren't aggressively trying different marketing strategies or expansion. It was more just like, if we're getting some growth, that seems good. We're not gunning to be super fast to number one, or, we're just kind of, let's focus on the product. I'd say from the beginning, that's been the biggest reason we've been successful is it's always been about the product and how do we make the most consistent product over time so that every time someone buys it, they know that they're going to get a good experience. And there's a lot of ways to cut corners in the production, in all kinds of things related to running the business. And we've always just stayed true to, making sure that every product that comes out of our facility is something that we would be proud to put in someone's hand. But man, there's so many decisions. And, again, a lot of them were not good decisions that we made, but I think a lot of it's tenacity. We're all super competitive and it's just, there's always a way forward. You just can't look backwards. You're going to make mistakes. And if you dwell on those, learn from them, but you can't change the past. You gotta figure out like, all right, what do we do now? And you got to move quickly and be decisive and try new things. I think one other thing early on was we were not good at raising money. And I think that benefited us. I think a lot of companies, once you bring in money, there's expectations on what you're going to do with it. And so you want to spend it. And then you end up doing all kinds of things that are not really core to your abilities. And we saw that over and over when all these companies were just raising insane amounts of money. And we were like, why? And no one really wanted to invest with us, partially because I think we were not selling a sexy enough story. We were like a little too honest about, the measured growth. And investors, were seeing much more hockey stick, at least projections all over the place. And so money was flowing into those types of, those types of businesses that were telling investors that they could hit these massive growth numbers. And, for us, it was always more of a long-term strategy that we're going to build a brand over time. And, as long as we focus on the product and building that loyalty, over time, it's going to be very valuable. I think it's also very scalable, more so than cultivation or retail, which were really like kind of the hot areas back then. Brands were relatively new now there's many brands, but, back in 2013, 14, 15, there weren't that many brands. And, that was not what people were talking about. And anytime I met somebody and they asked, if they heard that I was in the cannabis space, oh, you own dispensaries? No. Oh, so you have a grow? No, I have a brand. It was just not something people were focused on. But I've just always felt like that's where over time, as things open up, that's going to be the area that allows for the most scalability and growth. It's been a roller coaster. I mean, we have a lot of stories, but now we're in 4 states. We've expanded out of California just a couple of years ago for the first time. And I think that the brand allows us to do that.
Was the expansion started with which extraction method we're going to go to next after CO2, or is it we want to get a different product category? So because of that, we have to expand to a different extraction method?
I mean, CO2, when we started, people were still having explosions with butane, and it was scary because people were being arrested for it. And so we were trying to be, a little more cautious. So that was why we started with CO2. CO2 is actually not a great solvent for cannabis extraction. butane's much better. Once we got our facility in Oakland, we started in San Diego. We had a facility up in Grass Valley, north of Sacramento. We had set up a little grow. We got raided. We had to shut down business for several months. I mean, it was, just chaotic time. But and then we ended up in Santa Cruz and then in Fremont. I mean, we were in 5 locations, I think, in like a year and a half. And it was just, we realized we needed a home base where we could actually invest in the build out and the staffing and, like try to really build a business instead of being sort of on the run, which was really the way we were in those first few years. In Oakland, we ended up landing in Oakland. We had a facility by Harborside. And then in 2016, we bought a building in Oakland down by the Coliseum. It's 13,000 feet. And this was just after Oakland had set up a map with their green zone. And it allowed for all solvent manufacturing, which was interesting because then we said, all right, let's start experimenting with butane, with ethanol, still with CO2. And we just found that ethanol and butane were created a much better finished product. Were much better to work with. And we built what they call Class 1 Division 1 rooms to make sure that it's very safe, they're bomb proof. And that was kind of, it's just more efficient and creates a better tasting product at the end of the day. It pulls more of the terpenes and compounds that you want in that product. And I still think it's a great extraction method. We started experimenting with rosin, really pressing flour to rosin in 2016. And it was always something we wanted to be involved with, but very hard to scale. We've moved our business way more towards solventless extraction, which is just using ice and water. And I think that makes the best product and the cleanest product. And that move was really a result of the desire to be in front of where things are going and to lead the industry towards cleaner products. It's taken some time, but that's where the majority of our extraction efforts are today.
When you were trying to scale it up, was there tools that you pulled from other industries in order to have a consistent end product? Because as we were saying, like the input material is a plant, so it's extremely variable. And now you got all these other environmental variables in extraction. So are there tools or best practices that you pull from outside industries in order to try to have a consistent, reproducible end product?
Absolutely. We were all guilty at times of thinking that cannabis is different than anything else and no one understands this industry or our business. But the reality is it's still a business and it's still manufacturing. So absolutely, we would meet with different types of, chemistry people, labs to try to understand how they were doing things. We used a lot of equipment that was traditional to universities and to research labs in order to kind of adapt it to cannabis. There weren't many people doing it at the time. So a lot of it was just, and it was kind of cool because there was like a shared openness from most companies to like, well, we're trying, even competitive companies, we're trying this. Have you tried this? Have you tried, a lot of knowledge sharing, even though we were all competing with each other in the market. Those days were great. I don't know. It was just there. It was a lot less savage. There was less capital, and I think it was a lot of much smaller businesses. So, but absolutely, we used technology and equipment and processes and all those things that other industries were familiar with and were using.
The reason I bring that up is because I know the importance of building a brand for longevity, and having tools that allow for a consistent, reproducible product is what a customer really relies on when they purchase your product for the first time, right? Because that first experience is so important for them that if they have an amazing experience and they tell a friend and they go buy it a second time, it has to deliver on that same kind of feeling and that value, which is where the challenge of extraction really kind of becomes a big level in this whole puzzle piece.
Yeah. And it's an organic material and there's thousands of different strains and genetics, and they all have slightly different properties and smells and flavors. And so there's always going to be some variation in that finished product. Our goal was always to get whatever extract it is to be as close to the starting material as possible. And then over time to use more organic starting material and higher quality starting material. And that's where we've landed today. In 2013, extraction was mostly done on trim. So it was kind of a byproduct that everyone found a way to make into something that was decent. And that's really evolved considerably, where we have multiple acres that are grown specifically for our extraction process at this point. Whole flower.
So when you guys go into a new state, what extraction method do you lead with? Or is it kind of like you feel the market out, analyze which product category is going to do the best, and you kind of just like go in with a single product category and build from there?
We have expanded to Colorado, New York, and New Jersey from California. I know you guys are now able to buy our products legally without having your friends ship them to you from California, which is great.
We were before.
So Colorado was our first market we went to. We have a really long-standing friend and relationship with Lifa, who's a solventless company in Colorado. They have a small vertical operation. So we were excited to work with them, and we focus exclusively on solventless in Colorado. The more mature markets, that's where we're seeing the most success. So we have the number one rosin vape in California. Colorado, we've only been there for less than 2 years, and we have the number 4 rosin vape, but that's really where we're focused is solventless. New York and New Jersey, we entered with distillate, which we do quite well with, but that's not our best product. Our best product is solventless. We did launch our solventless product in New York. We are doing solventless extraction there. New Jersey's lagging a little bit behind. There's constraints around having the right supply and enough volume of that supply at a reasonable cost. And the newer markets, that's hard to come by. So in the more mature markets like California, Colorado, we have ample supply that we can make hash from that yields in our ice water extraction process. New York, we're finding some. New Jersey, I mean, even the cost of biomass, distillate, all that stuff is still very high. So I think it's going to be some time. But our goal as we look toward expansion nationally is to ultimately bring our solventless lineup everywhere we go.
How challenging of a balance is that in knowing that, let's say in New York, your distillate isn't your flagship product, but that's the one you start with. And consumer in New York who goes in dispensary for the first time might say, Jetty, I love their solventless product. Maybe tell someone else and someone just goes and buys it, assuming it's something else. How challenging is that for you in knowing that like you're not leading with your best product? And a lot of that is given the fact that the market conditions are what they are in an early state.
We entered New York. New York's crazy. It's a crazy market.
We do it our way.
You're trying to be nice.
And then super bonus. We do it our way.
Nate, who I mentioned earlier, his brother Rob, he's another one of the founders and still super involved in, especially in the out-of-state stuff. They're both from Buffalo, New York. So it was kind of a homecoming of sorts. New York, New Jersey were for all of us really exciting because that's where we grew up, and our families and our friends now can buy our products legally. So there was more to it than just randomness when we wanted, and we know the geography and we have a lot of relationships there. So a lot of the effort to go to other states is about having good partners. We did not acquire our own licenses and facilities. We're working with others, but at this point, we know that we want to make sure solventless is a fast follow anywhere we go. That's really what is we believe to be the best product in the market. It's the best product Jetty has, so we want to be able to offer that. But New York, there was one dispensary for many months, and it was just sort of our thoughts there were like, let's get into the market, let's kind of figure it out. I don't know, let's just start dabbling. We're not going to invest a lot. We're not going to try to do too much, but just by being there, we'll start hiring up a little bit of a team. We'll meet some of the owners of stores. This is going to be a huge market. New York, it's going to be huge. New York's a very, it's a brand heavy market. And it felt like, people are fairly affluent, especially in the New York City area. It's just, our products are typically a little more expensive. We're on the premium side of things. So there were a lot of reasons why we liked New York. We were not ready with solventless when we entered, but we are now. And we're bringing we have this new device, this new integrated all-in-one device from CCell, who is the best hardware manufacturer. It's called a mini tank. We launched it in California, Colorado already in solventless, and it's doing almost as much as our 510 thread. We are launching that in New York in our solventless lineup imminently, which I think that's the form factor people are looking for. So again, our goal was to kind of get there and, figure out the right product assortment over time. And we're honing in on that. So I do see a lot of opportunity in New York, New Jersey over the next couple of years. And we've only been there slightly over a year. And, but yeah, it's hard trying to manage, an operation that's across the country when most of our team is here in California.
Like those are the chaotic details, right? But also the fun elements of the industry of spinning up like a new market in a massive one where it's pure chaos. All the consumers are super anxious for California products. You've got an incredible product that you want to bring over, but it has to make some business sense for you to manufacture it. Plus, you need the right partners to produce it at a consistency and a quality product that customers can deliver. It is just endless variables on top of endless variables.
Yeah, I mean, the industry's tough. It's not, when I was running a deodorant business, we could ship our finished package to 50 states and, the package is the same, the product's the same. It was easy. Here, we're at a massive disadvantage, and it creates tremendous amount of cost that you got to have full vertical production and cultivation and retail. Like all of it has to be within each state. So yes, it's certainly, we want to grow, we want to be in every state, but it's got to happen at the right pace. And right now we're looking at going deeper in the markets we're in. We likely will move to some other markets this year, next year, but our goal is not to be in like many markets. It's to kind of be stronger in the markets where we really want to focus. And that's kind of the way we're looking at the main growth drivers for the business the next couple of years.
Do you want to tell us any of those states? It's just the three of us.
States that we're going to be looking to go to imminently. They're all interesting. We don't have anything locked in yet. So it's anything I would say is not even necessarily where we'll be next. I mean, Florida is very interesting for a number of reasons. I think Illinois and Ohio are somewhat interesting. Pennsylvania. There's a lot of interesting markets. It was 9 years before we ventured out of California. Back to one of your earlier questions, I think that saying no a lot was sort of a benefit to us. There were many opportunities where other companies or people wanted to take Jetty into other markets, and I just didn't think we were ready. So it takes a lot of bandwidth from our team. We don't have a big team, so it takes bandwidth, it takes capital. And what we've seen so far with our expansion is it's not immediately super profitable. So, we'll do it in a measured way. We'll let you know once we lock something in.
Speaking of other markets, and shipping anywhere domestically, what about the hemp market? Have you guys looked at that? What's your opinion on it right now?
We've looked at it. I think that it currently doesn't make sense for Jetty, but that could always change at some future point. It's very attractive for many reasons. You can, depending on how aggressive you want to be, you can ship to many markets and every market, or maybe restrict some. Kind of what I was saying about deodorant. You just ship your package to anywhere you want, and it seems easy. I think a lot of companies are actually making quite a bit of money. It's not heavily regulated. It's a very for Jetty. I think it makes more sense for edibles companies right now.
Could you make like a solventless CBD kind of tank? I don't know what the market for that is, but it was just a random thought. You know what I mean?
Yeah, again, we've looked at all of it. I could see there being a time. It's a completely different business model and a completely different skill set for your staff.
Yeah.
It's a lot more digital marketing heavy, direct to consumer understanding, and we don't have a lot of strength in those things because we don't do it. And so it just would take some capital that, we're still getting growth. That's sort of where it's a really hard industry. Like we've always prided ourselves on being focused. We've had top line growth in 10 out of 11 years that we've been in operation, and already showing growth this year. So I think that's going to continue. So if we can continue to get the growth in the license space, I do think that's harder. And I think if we can really succeed there, it's creating a stronger business. And if that growth slows or we don't really see good line of sight to where we can continue it, we would look even harder at hemp. And we have a strong enough balance sheet that we could allocate something, to it from an investment standpoint. It's just, I think it's a large undertaking, and we would have to really jump in and spend a lot of resources to do it. And I've been wrong about many things. Like maybe I'm wrong on this. I just I so far I don't think it's the right time for our existing business.
I think that's a very smart and prudent approach given what you've seen over the last 10 years, the waves, the shortcomings, the long-term approach that you have, because I think it's important to focus on what your team does really well, know what those skill sets are, and then watch the dynamic kind of unfold and say, okay, we've got our eyes here. If we have to explore and dabble a little capital here to kind of put our foot in the water, we can consider that. But if not, it's business as usual. We're going forward. Here's our approach. Here's the brand that we have. Here's our best product. And we still think we're in front of the market, because I think one of the elements that I really want to get your opinion on is that clean cannabis, which could still really be early in the industry. That is super early. So explain to our listeners what that means.
So I mentioned earlier, we always wanted to, remove any cutting agents. And at this point, everyone has kind of moved there. And when you do most types of solvent-based extraction, you're soaking the plant in a chemical solvent, and then you're evaporating that solvent out. What we've moved to is primarily a solventless extraction, which is just ice and water, and that's all that has touched that finished product. So when you're consuming that concentrate or that vape product, all that has touched it is ice and water. It has never touched any chemical. So it's cleaner. We've kind of taken that one step further in California. There's a relatively new certification called OCal, which is an organic certification that was set up by the state for cannabis. Our top supplier is Coastal Sun Farms in Santa Cruz. They're a tremendous grower. Everything they grow is to organic standards. And it's not just organic, it's regenerative farming. So if you go to their farm right now, they got goats walking around, like, kind of eating whatever's there. And, it's truly, the front edge of like the most sustainable farming practice that exists. And I think that's important to have companies that are leading on those things. So we have the OCal cultivation, as I just mentioned, but OCal has decided that only solventless extraction qualifies. So anything that's put through butane cannot be considered organic. So all of our solventless product is now fully OCal-certified based on the cultivation and the manufacturing process. And that's what's become the number one selling rosin vape in California. So people, it's not the majority of consumers, just like it isn't the majority of consumers that are buying organic products, organic food, cosmetics, but there is a growing interest in it. It is something that is going to stick around. People care about what they put on in their bodies, and we're giving them that option to know that it's the absolute safest, cleanest product available. There's been a lot of articles and headlines about pesticides all through the California supply chain, and actually in every market. Another thing we're doing is there's a new certification called ECO in California that's like independent, which requires testing for a bunch of pesticides that are not required to be tested for by the state of California. So it's voluntary. We've opted into that. So we're doing extended panel testing on all of our products to ensure that they don't have a lot of these compounds that, again, the state of California has not even said that those are banned. It's just a group of companies that want to see the industry cleaned up. And, we're competing with, as Kellen suggested, with the hemp market, but also an illicit market. And those markets objectively are less clean. They don't do the same type of testing. They're not required to. If you pull products off a dispensary shelf that is not licensed, they're going to test higher for all kinds of things that you don't want in your product. And we got to give people a reason to spend more money to shop in a licensed store. And that's what we're doing. And I think we're going to see more and more companies move that direction. And I certainly hope so, because it's the industry's fairly fragile. A lot of companies are not doing well. And a lot of it is just that, the compliance costs and the taxes are really high. And, if you buy from your dealer down the street or from a trap shop, you're going to get cheaper product. And it's pretty good product. We got to give people a reason. And when they see Jetty and they see that OCal symbol, that you're getting the absolute cleanest cannabis product that is available.
Can you just give our listeners just like a quick estimate of how much your team spends on testing? Because how expensive that is for your team that you voluntarily take on in order to ensure the quality of the product?
It's absolutely insane. So there is required testing in order to what's called compliance testing. So that is in order to meet all the requirements that the state regulators have set up. But we do significant testing in addition to that. As I mentioned, the ECOS testing, that's not required. But we'll also do like multiple tests throughout our production just to kind of be extra careful. We spend tens of thousands of dollars on testing on a monthly basis. I mean, it's just absolutely crazy. It's really, really expensive.
I think those are like the important things for people to hear, because I think sometimes people just don't recognize like the cost implications of doing these additional tests on top of these required tests that you've kind of described.
Yeah, even the required tests are expensive, but it's just like it's a very inefficient market in so many ways, and the regulators have struggled to keep up with what's rational and sensible, and so there's a lot of excess testing. Just given in the last year, we've done a lot of testing at multiple labs, even on the same product, just to kind of understand what's going on. And I mean, still, unfortunately, we'll get different results at different labs. And I'm not suggesting lab shopping. That's something a lot too. I'm more saying we're trying to figure out like how are their differences. Some of the labs that we work with, they're getting a lot better at hitting the same results as the other labs that seem to be better. That's a welcome change in the last 5 years, I would say.
All right, hard pivot. Dream vaping session, 3 people dead or alive.
That is a hard pivot. Okay. Bob Marley, Barack Obama, and my grandfather, my mother's father. He's dead. 2 dead, 1 alive.
1 year from now, what has changed?
There's going to be a number of businesses that are no longer around.
What question do you wish more people asked you?
What is OCal?
What is the most expensive lesson you've ever learned?
There's been a lot of them. So yeah, I would say, man, don't be too greedy when negotiating with investors.
Last question. Tell me something that is true that nobody agrees with you on.
I think I already did, which is that Jetty should not jump into the hemp beverage space.
Well, I mean, it's fair. It's fair. So, Ron, for our listeners, they want to get in touch, they want to learn more, and they want to buy Jetty products. Where can they find you?
So pretty much any licensed store in California, we're fairly well distributed, and we're not selling online, so there are deliveries, but most local dispensaries will have Jetty. As I mentioned, Colorado, New York, New Jersey. You can find on our website, which is jettyextracts.com. Instagram at Jetty Extracts. That's kind of where you can learn the most about us.
Cool. Thanks for taking the time. This was a lot of fun.
Yeah, thanks, guys.